Welcome to the Malfunkt10n Radio, powered by God Access. I'm Genesis, your guide into the chaos of cybersecurity, pen testing, and red teaming. From hacking systems to exposing vulnerabilities, we're here to break things and build them back stronger. If it's not malfunctioning, we're not doing it right. Now, over to your hosts, Adam and Eve, for today's breakdown.
Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine the most notorious digital spies, right? Groups that always seem to be lurking in the shadows, totally unseen, and then suddenly, bam, their own closely guarded secrets are spilled out into the open for the entire world to see. It's really an unprecedented turn of events in the cyber world, a true aha moment for anyone tracking the ever-shifting and often really opaque landscape of advanced cyber warfare. Today, we're delving deep into an extraordinary breach, one that really pulled back the curtain on a major player. We've got a stack of fascinating sources, from in-depth articles and cybersecurity research to, get this, actual excerpts from the original revelations at DEFCON 33 and Frack magazine. All of these focus on the North Korean state-sponsored hacking group known as Kimsuky. Our mission in this deep dive is to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge and insight from this, like treasure trove of leaked data. We want to provide you with a shortcut to being truly well-informed about one of the world's most persistent and, well, until now, pretty enigmatic advanced persistent threat groups, or APTs. You know, these are those state-backed hacking teams with long-term goals, often espionage or even sabotage.
Yeah, and what's truly fascinating here, I think, is that this isn't just another cybersecurity incident to add to the long list we hear about. This is a rare, almost unprecedented window into the actual inner workings of a nation-state actor. For cybersecurity professionals, sure, but crucially for you, our curious listener, this offers concrete, real-world examples of attack infrastructure. It reveals previously unknown campaigns, and it really challenges our traditional assumptions about who these groups are and, maybe even more importantly, where they might actually be operating from. And the hackers behind the breach, the ones known only by their pseudonyms Saber and Cyberg, they even cited ethical motivations for what they did, which in itself raises a really important question. Can hacking, even when it's exposing malicious actors, ever be truly ethical in the broader sense?
That's a powerful ethical question to kick this off with, definitely. And as we explore the layers of this particular deep dive, we're going to tackle some truly intriguing mysteries, including maybe the biggest head-scratcher of all. Is Kim, our central North Korean operator from the leaked data, actually Chinese? Get ready for some surprising facts and insights that will fundamentally change how you think about nation-state cyber operations and the complex world of attribution. So let's set the stage first. Who exactly is Kimsuky? And how did they manage to carve out such a notorious reputation for themselves in this murky world of cyber-espionage?
Well, Kimsuky first emerged onto the cybersecurity radar back in 2013. They were initially identified by researchers at Kaspersky. Since then, they've not just endured, they've actually evolved into one of the most persistent and, frankly, sophisticated advanced persistent threat groups out there. What's particularly telling about their widespread and varied activities is their myriad of aliases. They have so many names. Security researchers track them under a whole host of different labels. APT43, Black Banshee, Emerald Sleet, G00886, Sparkling Pisces, Springtail, Thallium, just to name a few.
Wow, that's a lot of names for one group.
It is. And this isn't just a random assortment of, cool-sounding code names. It often stems from different security vendors initially discovering separate campaigns. So each vendor might give the new activity a unique name before the broader cybersecurity community kind of pieces it all together and realizes that all these seemingly disparate operations are actually connected to the same adversary. Imagine a group so active and diverse in its methods that it essentially earns like a dozen different monikers before the industry finally puts all the puzzle pieces together. It really reveals the consistent hand behind them, It highlights their reach and the real challenge of tracking them effectively.
That certainly underscores the difficulty in pinning these groups down, especially when they seem so good at masquerading. What kind of targets do they typically go after, and how far does their operational reach truly extend?
Their core focus has historically been on South Korean entities, and these targets are very deliberate. They align very closely with North Korea's strategic intelligence priorities. We're talking about critical sectors like think tanks that shape policy, major industrial organizations, and even sensitive infrastructure like nuclear power operators.
Nuclear power?
Yeah, a prime example is the high-profile infiltration of Korea hydro and nuclear power back in March 2015. That was one of their most publicized early successes, actually. It allowed them to steal sensitive data directly related to critical national infrastructure. Beyond that, they've also targeted the South Korean Ministry of Unification, which, plays a crucial role in inter-Korean relations. Their interest here is clearly tied to gathering intelligence on South Korean political and military strategies, as well as their nuclear capabilities.
Okay, so a clear focus on South Korea, especially sensitive areas. But their focus isn't just confined to the immediate vicinity of the Korean peninsula then. Are they looking further afield?
Absolutely. Their ambitions certainly aren't geographically limited. While South Korea remains, primary target, their operations have broadened significantly over time. They really demonstrate a truly global approach to intelligence collection and espionage now. Current intelligence indicates Kimsuky has expanded their targeting to include international bodies, like United Nations organizations. Yes. For instance, back in 2020, they notably attempted to compromise 11 officials within the UN Security Council. That's a clear move to gain insights into global diplomatic efforts, right? They've also expanded into various sectors across the United States, Japan, Russia, and Europe. Their target list now encompasses a really wide array: government agencies, educational institutions, business services, even manufacturing companies. This expansion shows a clear shift from a purely regional focus to a much broader global intelligence gathering, basically seeking any information that can benefit the North Korean regime.
And are there specific examples of this expansion?
Yeah, we've seen some. In 2019, they launched a unique campaign targeting retired South Korean diplomats and military personnel, which indicates an interest in individuals who, even if they're out of active service, might still possess or have access to sensitive information. Then, in May 2021, their presence was detected within the internal networks of the Korea Atomic Energy Research Institute. That just further reinforces their persistent, high-value focus on nuclear-related intelligence targets.
This sounds like a group that's constantly adapting and expanding its capabilities. What truly sets them apart, it seems, is their operational tempo and how they've evolved. Can you give us a snapshot of that evolution?
Sure. CISA assessments confirm Kimsuky has been actively operating since approximately 2012. So that establishes them as a really long-running threat with sustained and evolving capabilities. More recently, in early 2024, we saw them launch a pretty sophisticated campaign dubbed Deep Hashtag Ryosu. This was a multi-stage attack specifically targeting Windows systems. It typically began with highly deceptive emails containing malicious attachments, classic social engineering, but executed with real precision.
So still relying on tricking people.
Exactly. But when opened, these attachments didn't just drop simple malware. They executed complex PowerShell and VB scripts. These scripts then acted as sort of stealthy initial footholds, downloading additional payloads from legitimate cloud services like Dropbox. Yeah, like we said before, they used Dropbox, including remote access Trojans such as Drurat. The goal here was full control, allowing them to perform keylogging, clipboard monitoring, data exfiltration, the works. And all of this was done using advanced evasion techniques designed to blend into regular network traffic, making it incredibly difficult for standard security tools to detect. This particular campaign really underscores their continuous refinement of delivery mechanisms, even while still heavily relying on social engineering as their initial point of compromise. They're constantly tuning how they get that initial payload delivered to achieve maximum impact with minimal detection.
Okay, if we connect this to the bigger picture then, how does Kimsuky, with its long history and evolving tactics, fit into the broader North Korean cyber landscape? Are they like an isolated cell, or are they part of a larger, more coordinated effort?
That's a great question. Understanding Kimsuky's place in the larger scheme really requires looking at the Reconnaissance General Bureau, or RGB. This is North Korea's primary intelligence agency, and it essentially controls most of North Korea's known cyber capabilities. These operations primarily fall under what's known as Bureau 121, or maybe its speculated successor, the Cyber Warfare Guidance Bureau. Initially, APT-43, which is Kimsuky, operated under a more specialized unit, the 5th Bureau. That unit was specifically focused on inter-Korean affairs. This suggests maybe a more compartmentalized approach back then, allowing for a specialized focus.
But things changed.
It seems so. The global disruption caused by the COVID-19 pandemic appears to have triggered a significant internal reorganization within North Korea's cyber forces. Current intelligence suggests that all North Korean APT groups now work in conjunction under direct RGB control. This likely reflects a strategic need for more coordinated and flexible operations, especially during periods of increased global uncertainty and when facing new intelligence priorities.
What are the implications of that kind of reorganization?
Well, the implications are quite profound, potentially. It could mean more coordinated, and more potent attacks, as resources and intelligence are centrally managed and deployed across different groups. This blurring of lines between the individual APT groups also makes attribution even more challenging for defenders. You might see different teams leveraging shared tools or intelligence, making it harder to say definitively this was Kimsuky versus another North Korean group.
Okay, that makes sense.
What's consistently clear, though, is that the group's campaigns are always aligned with North Korean state interests and geopolitical developments. Their targeting patterns have evolved in distinct phases that directly reflect these changing state priorities. For example, before October 2020, their focus was laser-sharp on government, diplomatic, and think tank entities related to Korean Peninsula security, mostly in South Korea and the U.S. Then, during the peak of the COVID-19 response period, say from October 2020 to October 2021, we observed a significant, almost pivot towards health-related sectors and pharmaceutical companies globally.
Really? Pharma companies?
Yeah. This shift was very likely aimed at supporting North Korea's pandemic efforts, although the specific intelligence benefits to the regime remain somewhat unclear. But this coordinated targeting with other North Korean cyber operators during that time points to significant resource allocation and a high prioritization of health intelligence. It shows the regime's adaptability and willingness to direct its cyber forces towards immediate national needs. We even saw tactical variations in their malware deployment during this period. They used specific tools like Venombite, Sweet Drop, and Bittersweet in their COVID-19 operations targeting South Korea. It demonstrates their ability to tailor specific malware families to specific operational requirements and target environments.
So if Kimsuky isn't just relying on those flashy, expensive zero-day exploits, the brand new, undiscovered vulnerabilities, how exactly do they achieve their objectives? What does their operational playbook actually look like, and how do they manage to stay so persistent for so long?
Well, Kimsuky is really a master of what we call social engineering, but they do it with meticulous planning and execution. Instead of always hunting for exotic vulnerabilities, their genius often lies in leveraging familiar, everyday IT functions in unexpected ways. We can map out their comprehensive tactics, techniques, and procedures, or TTPs, across the entire attack lifecycle using the ATT&CK framework. That framework is like a common language for describing attacker behaviors, and it really highlights their systematic and often quiet approach to digital espionage.
Okay, let's dive into that systematic approach then. Starting with initial access, how do they typically get their foot in the door without tripping all the alarms?
Their primary entry point, time and time again, is phishing. But, like we said, this isn't just generic spray and pray spam you might get in your junk folder. It's highly targeted. We often see them use spear phishing with attachments. That's T1566.001 in IRA terms. They send malicious files meticulously tailored to specific individuals or organizations to increase the likelihood someone actually opens them. Think of an email that looks like it's from a trusted colleague or maybe a relevant government agency.
Very convincing, I bet.
Exactly. And they also frequently use spear phishing with links. T1566.002. They craft emails with malicious links that, when clicked, redirect targets to attacker-controlled infrastructure. This requires significant reconnaissance on their part beforehand to make the phishing lures incredibly convincing and relevant to their targets. They make you want to click.
So they've successfully fished their way in. That's the first step. But just getting access isn't enough. They need to prepare their own infrastructure, right? What kind of behind-the-scenes work do they do to set up their command centers and tools?
Right. Once they have that initial foothold, they move into what's called resource development. Think of it like a spy setting up their safe houses and getting all their gadgets ready before the mission. It involves acquiring virtual private servers, or VPS, T1583.003. These are essentially remote computers they rent online. These are used to host their command and control C2 servers, the central hubs they use to communicate with their malware, and also as staging areas for operations. Using VPS makes detection harder because the infrastructure isn't directly linked back to North Korea.
Clever.
Yeah. They'll also obtain legitimate-looking, or sometimes even fraudulent, code signing certificates, T1588.003, to make their malware appear trustworthy to operating systems and security software, helps bypass initial defenses, and they acquire other digital certificates, T1588.004, for secure communications, and prepare malicious links, T1608.003, and maybe even set up phishing infrastructure, T1608.005. They're essentially building their launch pads and supply lines before the main attack really kicks off.
Okay, and for actually getting their malicious code to run, the execution phase, how do they run it without immediately raising alarms or needing to install obvious new software? What are the TTPs there?
When it comes to executing their malicious code, Kimsuky's strategy is often about hiding in plain sight. They lean heavily on tools already built into the Windows operating system. For example, they widely use Windows Management Instrumentation, or WMI T10047. WMI is a powerful, legitimate system utility that lets administrators manage computers remotely. Kimsuky abuses it for remote execution of commands and scripts. This makes their malicious activity look like normal system operations, almost like a spy using a janitor's uniform to walk through a secure building. They blend in.
So they use the system against itself.
Pretty much. They also cleverly create scheduled tasks, T1053.005, to ensure their malicious code automatically restarts or executes at specific times, even if the machine reboots. Quiet persistence. And they extensively use command and scripting interpreters, T1059, like PowerShell, for fileless attacks, where malware runs directly in memory without writing to disk. Much harder for antivirus to spot. They'll use the Windows Command Shell, Visual Basic Scripts, VBA, embedded in documents, and even JavaScript via web browsers. They also have techniques to load malicious DLLs, those dynamic link-like library files, through legitimate shared modules, T1129, to inject their code. They might exploit client application vulnerabilities, exploitation for client execution, T1203, trick users into opening malicious files, T1204.002, or create modify Windows services for service execution, T1569.002, with system privileges. These are all techniques designed to mimic normal system activity, making them incredibly hard to spot without deep scrutiny.
Okay, so they've executed their code. Now they need to maintain control and receive instructions. How do they handle command and control, or C2? How do they communicate back home without getting detected?
This is where they get quite clever in their evasion tactics. They frequently use standard web protocols like HTTP and HTTPS P1071.001 for their C2 communications. By making their malicious traffic look like normal web browsing, it blends seamlessly with legitimate internet activity, makes it harder for network defenders to distinguish. They also leverage DNS requests, T1071.004, for covert communication channels, basically using the system that translates website names into IP addresses to sneak messages back and forth. Yeah, and for added stealth, they often use multi-hop proxies, T219DP003, to obscure their true C2 server location, bouncing their traffic through multiple intermediary servers. They might even implement non-application layer protocols, T295, for custom comms. What's particularly notable is their abuse of legitimate web services, T1002, like social media or cloud storage for C2. Imagine them hiding commands or exfiltrated data within seemingly innocuous cloud files or maybe even social media posts.
That's sneaky.
Very. They're very good at establishing bidirectional communication, T1102.002, for command execution and data exfiltration. And they rely on Ingress tool transfer, T1105, to download additional payloads or tools onto the compromised machine. They'll also use standard encoding, T1132.001, to obfuscate their communications and employ asymmetric cryptography, T1573.002, for secure channels, making their messages very difficult to intercept and understand without the proper keys.
Okay, so they have control, they're communicating secretly. Now they need to get a lay of the land, right? Understand what they've infiltrated. What about discovery? How do they map out the victim's environment?
Right, discovery is crucial. They perform extensive reconnaissance once inside a network. This isn't random, it's a methodical process. They identify system services, T1007, running on the machines, query the registry, T1012, to gather critical system configuration details. They map out network configurations, T1016, to understand connectivity and potential lateral movement paths to other systems. They discover who the system owner or user is, T1033, and gather process information, T1057, to see what software is running and maybe identify security tools. They pull comprehensive system information, T202, explore files and directories, T2083, looking for sensitive data. They catalog accounts, T2087, and software, T518 installed, and even determine system language settings, T1614.001, to perhaps tailor their attacks or avoid detection in specific regions. It's a very thorough approach to understanding their newly acquired environment, which makes them incredibly effective at finding what they're actually looking for.
And after all that discovery, finding the juicy bits, how do they actually go about collection? How do they gather the specific intelligence they want?
This is where they zero in on stealing the sensitive data itself. They'll deploy keyloggers, T1056.001, to capture every keystroke, passwords, emails, chats, everything typed. They'll take frequent screen captures, T11113, to gather visual information and monitor user activities, basically seeing what the user sees in real time or near real time. They also monitor clipboard data, T11113, stealing anything copied and pasted, which often includes sensitive info like passwords or financial details people copy between apps.
Crucially, they access and exfiltrate data from information repositories, T12 like databases, file shares, network drives going after the core intelligence troves. And before exfiltration, they often package and compress this data using common archive utilities, T1516.01 like WinRAR or 7-zip, makes it easier to steal large amounts of data and sometimes helps disguise the files being sent out.
Okay, so they've got the goods. To ensure they can keep coming back, though, even after system reboots or maybe security trying to clean up, persistence is key, right? How do they ensure long-term access?
Indeed. Persistence is absolutely fundamental to their long-term espionage objectives. They can't just get in once. They need to stay. They employ various techniques to ensure their malware continues to run or it can be easily reactivated if removed. For example, they modify Office application startup settings, T1137, to execute malicious code whenever a common app like Word or Excel is launched. They also install web shells, T1505.003, on compromised web servers. These are small scripts that give them persistent backdoor access through just a web browser. Very handy for them. They create malicious Windows services, T1543.003, that automatically start with the system, effectively embedding themselves into the OS's core functions. They modify registry run keys or startup folders, T1547.001, classic technique to ensure their malware executes at system boot. They've even been known to register WinLogan helper DLLs, T1547.004, to load their malicious code during the Windows login process itself. And they use shortcut modification, T1547.009, altering legitimate application shortcuts to execute their code while still launching the intended program, making the compromise incredibly resilient and often invisible to the user.
Wow, they really cover their bases for sticking around. And to avoid detection once they're in and persistent, defense evasion must be absolutely critical for a group like Kimsuky. What are their go-to methods for staying hidden from security tools?
Absolutely. Defense evasion is a huge part of their operational success. They put a lot of effort into this. They employ extensive obfuscation techniques, T1027, things like binary padding, software packing, removing indicators, embedding payloads within seemingly harmless code, all designed to hide their malicious code's true nature from signature-based detection. They might use invalid code signatures, T1036.001, or double file extensions, T1036.007, to bypass application whitelisting and trick users or systems. Process injection, T1055, is very common, where they inject their malicious code into legitimate running processes like explorer.exe, making it much harder to spot the malicious activity. This includes DLL injection and threat execution hijacking. To cover their tracks forensically, they perform file deletion, T107004, and timestamp, T107006, manipulating file creation and modification timestamps to hinder analysis. They modify the registry, T1112, manipulate access tokens, T1134, to potentially elevate privileges. They deobfuscate decode files, T140, only at the last minute in memory. They abuse legitimate Windows tools like Mishta, T1218.C05, to execute scripts. They employ virtualization sandbox evasion, C5107 techniques, checking for system characteristics specific to analysis environments to avoid being caught by security researchers. They bypass user account control, T1548.002, use legitimate or stolen code signing certificates, T1553.002, to make malware seem trustworthy. They even perform VBA stomping, T1564.007, to remove source code from macro-enabled documents, making reverse engineering harder. And finally, things like reflective code loading, T1320, and debugger evasion, T1322, are used to prevent forensic analysts from easily understanding their true capabilities. It's a constant, elaborate game of hide-and-seek with defenders.
So they're incredibly good at getting in, staying hidden, collecting data. What about the actual impact they seek sometimes? Is it always just espionage? And how do they handle exfiltration, getting all that stolen data out?
While espionage is primary, impact sometimes involves tactics like service stop, T1489. They might disable security tools or other critical system services to maintain access and avoid detection, or even disrupt operations slightly. In some cases, they might initiate a system shutdown or reboot, T1529, perhaps to complete malware installations or further cover their tracks. And for exfiltration, getting the data out, T2020, they typically use automated processes to systematically steal and transmit data from compromised systems back to their C2 infrastructure, ensuring a continuous and efficient flow of intelligence.
Okay, one last crucial area, credential access. How do they steal the keys to the kingdom, so to speak, the passwords and logins?
Right, credential access is absolutely fundamental to expanding their reach within a network and accessing valuable resources. They do sometimes resort to brute force attacks, T1110, systematically guessing or using dictionary attacks to crack passwords for accounts, although this can be noisy. But crucially, and very commonly, they extract credentials from web browsers, T1555.003. This is a highly effective method for stealing stored passwords and authentication tokens directly from web browsers like Chrome or Firefox. It gives them access to a vast array of online services the user logs into, from email and social media to internal corporate portals. It's often one of the easiest ways for them to get a trove of valuable access with relatively little effort.
That's a comprehensive and frankly pretty alarming playbook they've got. Can you give us a sense of the actual tools, the notorious malware families they've been linked to over the years? What are some names we might recognize?
Yeah, their arsenal is quite diverse. It tells us Kimsuky isn't just relying on off-the-shelf tools anyone can buy. They have their own stuff. The real insight here is their continuous development cycle. They maintain this diverse arsenal, constantly custom-tuning their malware to adapt to new defenses and operational needs. It shows a long-term commitment to offensive capabilities and an agile response to the cybersecurity arms race. For example, some of the notable ones that have made headlines include Hangman.v2. That's a sophisticated backdoor variant using HTTP for its C2 comms, often mimicking legitimate web traffic to stay hidden. Then there's Pencil Down, a CC++ Windows downloader designed to collect basic system info and then fetch the next stage payloads. Gold Dragon is another C downloader. It can retrieve payloads via HTTP, either writing them directly to disk or, interestingly, executing them from within a Hangul word processor document. HWP is a common application in South Korea for added stealth.
Tailored to their targets.
Exactly. We've also seen Latipop, which is a Visual Basic script used for system enumeration and executing additional VB content. Sometimes that leads to deploying the passmark credential theft payload. And finally, Venombyte. This is a CC++ Windows downloader that actually evolved from an earlier tool called Pendown. It uses custom encoding and memory execution for heightened stealth, really demonstrating that iterative development we just talked about. So it shows a dynamic mix of custom tools and evolving capabilities. They're constantly adapting their arsenal to the targets and the defensive measures they encounter.
Okay, now for the headline act. The irony here is just, it's almost palpable, isn't it? Kimsuky, a group famous for compromising others, for lurking in the digital shadows for years, finds itself on the receiving end of a very, very public breach. How did this unprecedented turn of events, this major intelligence windfall for the rest of us, actually unfold?
It was truly an extraordinary series of events. Two hackers, known only by their handles Saber and Cyberg, successfully infiltrated Kimsuky's infrastructure. And then they didn't just quietly exfiltrate data, they leaked a massive 8.9 gigabytes of highly sensitive operational data out to the world. This bombshell was first revealed at DEFON33, one of the world's largest hacker conferences, and subsequently published in Frack magazine. This gave us this absolutely unprecedented window into a nation-state actor's day-to-day operations.
And their motivation, why did they do it?
Well, their motivation, as they explicitly stated, was rooted in ethics. They claimed Kimsuky operates for all the wrong reasons, is driven by political agendas, and is morally perverted, rather than practicing hacking as, like, an art form. This ethical hacking motivation used against a state-sponsored group is incredibly significant. It shifts the narrative from pure cyber warfare to one of, moral judgment. It turns the tables on an adversary that typically operates with impunity and expects total secrecy. It was a pretty bold statement by Saber and Cyber.
That's a powerful statement indeed. So what did these initial data dumps actually reveal about the operational environment of one specific Kimsuky operator? This person the hackers dubbed Kim. What did we learn about their day-to-day work setup?
The initial dump provided incredible detail through a trove of system artifacts. It showed that Kim used a Linux development system, specifically Deepin 20.9 Linux, and this was running as a guest virtual machine, or VM. This VM had the host's C drive mounted via something called HGSS, which clearly indicates that Kim was running this Linux environment on top of a Windows host system. It's a pretty common setup for operational security, where the primary work is done in an isolated VM to contain things.
Makes sense. What else?
Well, their digital footprint, which was painstakingly reconstructed from browser history in both Brave and Chrome browsers, showed approximately 20,000 entries. That's a lot of browsing. This also exposed operational email addresses they used, like jader97271@wuzak.com and soka75424@weebee.com. Crucially, their browsing patterns revealed extensive use of operational security tools, OPSEC tools designed to hide their digital tracks online. Things like user agent spoofing extensions, which make their web browser appear to be a different type of device or browser, making them harder to identify. They also use tools like Proxy Switchy Omega to bounce their internet traffic through multiple locations, obscuring their true origin, and cookie editors to manage their online identity. Ironically, even with all these meticulous efforts to stay invisible and secure, these very tools didn't prevent their own compromise in the end. You can almost picture Kim's desktop from the screenshot, if we had it, kind of cluttered with the tools of their trade, totally oblivious to the fact that their own secrets were about to be laid bare.
The irony is thick. And what about their internal documentation? And even more critically, their passwords. Did the leaks reveal anything about their own internal security practices?
Yeah, perhaps most revealing about their internal practices was finding a Korean language document that served as an operational manual for one of their back doors. It even included this officially worded statement explicitly forbidding the use of the back door outside its designated purposes. That suggests, formal operational guidelines and some level of oversight within Kimsuky. It points to an organizational structure and discipline you might expect from a state actor.
But the passwords!
Ah, yes. Even more critical, a file named VPS2241A103.dogsax contained a shocking number of operational passwords.
Yes.
It's laid out in the document. We're talking about root access credentials, like root 1quas2wx. I mean, that's basic.
Basic.
Yeah. Email account access for Dysana91 at tutamail.com with the password .qaz04rfv at #Vana. Credentials for VPS management portals at https://sg24.vps.4083. Using the username center 2025a at tutamail.com and password H4FHKMWMPXABZ. And hosting service credentials for https://monovm.com with that same Dysana91 at tutamail.com. Email and the password DR57568% G6Emmer. This highlights systematic password reuse patterns across their entire infrastructure. The same email, variations on simple passwords.
That's staggering for a group like this.
It really is. For a group of Kimsuky's supposed sophistication, this indicates significant, almost baffling security vulnerabilities in their own OPSEC practices. It's a stark disconnect between their advanced attack capabilities and what appears to be surprisingly lax internal security. It's almost shocking to hear, right? Here's a group capable of highly sophisticated attacks, yet they're making what anyone in security would consider a rookie mistake. It's a bit like a master lockpicker leaving their own front door unlocked with the key in it.
That's a perfect analogy. So the second data dump then built on this, did it expose even more about their specific targets and the technical infrastructure they were using?
Yes, the second dump truly connected the dots between their internal operations, those passwords, and their external targets. It revealed a specific VPS named VPS1735811.325 and hosted at vps.bz, which served as a central hub for various spear phishing campaigns. The logs from the server explicitly named the Defense Counterintelligence Command, dcc.mil.kr, in South Korea as a prominent target. They even had an administrative contact email, huni1982 at naver.com logged, which potentially indicates a compromised vector or maybe just a specific individual they were targeting within that organization. The logs also showed attempts against other high-value South Korean targets, including the Supreme Prosecutor's Office, spo.go.ar, the Central Government Portal Korea.kr, and major domestic platforms like dom.net, kakero.com, and naver.com. This illustrates their broad intelligence gathering mandate, hitting both government and widely used public services.
And did they actually gain access to any internal government networks? That would be a huge leap from just phishing attempts.
Most significantly, yes. The evidence points to successful compromises that went far beyond mere credential theft or phishing attempts. There was clear evidence indicating a successful compromise of South Korea's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which, if true, would have provided them with invaluable access to diplomatic communications and foreign policy intelligence. A huge win for them. And perhaps even more profoundly, evidence suggested penetration of internal South Korean government networks through a system referred to as Project Honoratak. A specific domain, honora9.sas.gcloud.go.kr, was identified as a potential internal government portal they accessed. This represents a really profound level of access for an adversary, allowing them to gather deep intelligence from within the governmental structure, not just poking at the external facing systems.
Okay, that's significant. What about their actual command and control setup, the infrastructure they used to run these attacks? Were those details exposed too?
Absolutely. The breach laid bare their operational infrastructure in detail. It showed an origin IP address of 156.59.13.153, which geolocated to Singapore. For operational security, they ran their SSH daemon, the software allowing secure remote access on a non-standard port, 60233, instead of the default port 22.
Trying to hide.
Standard practice for hiding,
Yeah. Interestingly, port 4012 on the same infrastructure displayed a TLS certificate with the common name cn.appletells.com. Using EFA, which is like a search engine for internet-connected devices, researchers discovered this specific certificate across approximately 1,100 unique IP addresses. And these were primarily located in China and Hong Kong.
China and Hong Kong, not
Right.
North Korea or Singapore.
It's exactly.
This strongly suggests a sophisticated proxy network, or what we sometimes call an operational relay box, or ORB network. It's similar to previously identified infrastructure known as superjumper. These networks are explicitly designed to obscure their true location and make attribution incredibly difficult. We also saw Kim register the domain webcloud-notice.com on June 13, 2024. That domain now just redirects to bitcoincore.org. It was possibly used as a redirector or maybe an operational cover domain to make C2 traffic look like legitimate cryptocurrency activity.
Yeah.
And the WHOIS record for webcloud-notice.com lists a clearly false persona. Mortimer Little of MLT Miko in Kenosha, West Virginia, using that same email, dysonic91@tudamail.com we saw earlier. It really highlights the meticulous effort they put into their OPSEC, even if it ultimately failed them due to things like password reuse.
This breach also seemed to highlight Kimsuky's expansion into corporate targets beyond just government entities, didn't it?
Yes, the dumps provided clear evidence of this shift as well. They revealed certificates and keys related to rc.kt.2.kkr, which is South Korea Telecom's remote control service, and also credentials targeting LG Uplus, which is South Korea's second largest wireless carrier with millions of subscribers, a major corporate target. What's particularly revealing here is their methodology. It looks like a supply chain attack. Intelligence suggests Kimsuky first compromised a company called Securikai. Securikai provides multi-factor authentication services to LG Uplus. They then appeared to pivot from that initial access at Securikai to reach the telecommunications provider itself. This demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of supply chain relationships and a willingness to target service providers to achieve their primary objectives, rather than just a direct frontal assault on the main target.
That's advanced thinking.
It is. And we also saw evidence in the file system, in the workhome user.cachevmware drag-and-drop directory, showing the operator transferring Cobalt, strike loaders, and PowerShell reverse shells between their Windows and Linux machines, along with compiled code apparently specifically designed for proxying into those on our government networks. This suggests a highly adaptable and cross-platform operational approach.
And expanding even further beyond Korea, what did the regional expansion indicators suggest about their broader strategic interests? Were they looking elsewhere too?
Yeah, the browser history analysis, which is always a goldmine for understanding reconnaissance efforts, revealed visits to numerous Taiwan government and military websites. This strongly suggests a potential expansion of their targeting beyond just the Korean peninsula to include broader regional government and military entities in East Asia. This aligns perfectly with North Korea's known strategic interest in regional security developments and potential intelligence collection requirements. They're likely looking at the bigger picture of East Asian geopolitics and gathering information that could be valuable in any regional conflict or negotiation.
So putting it all together.
Well, it all highlights a really critical insight for defenders. While Kimsuky clearly demonstrates advanced technical capabilities and apparently formal operational procedures, the exposure of these extensive credential lists, reused passwords, infrastructure details, it suggests very tangible vulnerabilities in their own operational security practices. And defenders can absolutely exploit these weaknesses. It's a goldmine for understanding where even sophisticated adversaries can make mistakes, telling us where to look and what common errors to hunt for. #HEP4. Diving into Kim's arsenal, specific tools from the leak.
Okay, let's get even more specific now about the actual tools Kim had in their digital toolkit. What exactly did these intelligence dumps reveal about their working arsenal, the actual weapons they wielded in their cyber campaigns?
The compromised VPS provided an absolutely unprecedented view directly into their active arsenal. It was like looking over Kim's shoulder. Within the Will Whip directory on that server, we found a highly sophisticated phishing toolkit. This wasn't just a simple script. It was a whole suite of interconnected PHP files, config.php, function.php, generator.php, and others. And it was clearly designed to target personnel at South Korea's Defense Counterintelligence Command. The attack flow was meticulously crafted. Victims would receive seemingly legitimate links.
From those spear phishing emails we talked about earlier.
Exactly. The links would land them on a phishing site, carefully mimicking legitimate login portals. Once a victim entered their credentials, bam, captured by the toolkit. But the really clever part was the immediate redirection after stealing the credentials. They were sent to a legitimate URL that deliberately threw a login error message. This cunning social engineering technique was designed to make victims think, oh, just a technical glitch, or maybe I typed my password wrong, rather than realizing their credentials had just been stolen. It's an extra layer of deception to avoid immediate suspicion and password resets.
That's a truly clever evasion tactic, making the victim blame themselves or the system. Beyond just that login flow, what else did this specific phishing toolkit contain? What were its features?
Well, the config.php file itself was a treasure trove of operational details and paranoia, you could say. It contained extensive IP blacklists specifically designed to prevent known security companies, names like Trend Micro, Google, Bluecoat, Symantec, OnLab, Amazon, from discovering their phishing infrastructure. They also included user agent blacklists for anything that looked like a bot, spider, crawl, or virus, trying to block automated scanning. And there was a language whitelist, only allowing users whose browsers reported US, Japanese, or Korean languages to proceed. This shows a sophisticated awareness of threat hunting and security research methodologies. They were actively trying to cloak their operations from known defenders.
Well, you mentioned a flaw.
Yes. Perhaps the most glaring OPSEC flaw was found in generator.php, which served as the remote administrative interface for creating the phishing pages. While it was supposedly password protected, a critical security flaw existed. The authentication cookie needed to access it was hard-coded right into the script. This meant that anyone who knew or could find that specific cookie value could simply set it in their browser and gain full administrative access to the entire toolkit without needing any password at all.
Wow. Hard-coded credentials again.
Exactly. For a group of Kimsuky's claimed sophistication, that's a fundamental, almost unbelievable security error. The interface itself, once accessed, was pretty slick, though. It allowed them to easily create and manage phishing emails by simply inputting the target email address, the malicious phishing URL, the post-phishing redirect URL, and the HTML content for the fake email body. It made their campaigns highly scalable and efficient once that initial flawed setup was complete.
So phishing was clearly a primary weapon, and they had a dedicated toolkit for it, albeit a flawed one. What else beyond that was in their arsenal that pointed to their more advanced capabilities? Anything more complex?
Oh, yeah. The dumps also revealed a Tomcat remote kernel backdoor, which represents some of Kimsuky's most sophisticated known capabilities. This is a complex three-component system. It included a client part, TTPs, a server-side loadable kernel module, or LKM vmwfsxs.mod.c, and a user-land backdoor component, master.c. Now, a loadable kernel module, an LKM, is a piece of code that can be loaded directly into a running operating system kernel.
So super deep access.
Exactly. It operates at the very core of the system, giving it immense power and incredible stealth potential. This backdoor used direct TCP communication, and the LKM component specifically monitored network traffic, looking for unique combinations of TCP sequence numbers and IP identification fields. This created a highly covert communication channel that operated below the level of normal network monitoring capabilities, making it incredibly hard for defenders to spot. For even greater stealth, it communicated with its userland companion, the part running outside the kernel, through ProKit-Pipsicard. That looks like a seemingly legitimate system interface related to power management or hardware, but it was actually being abused by the malware for hidden communication. This kind of kernel-level backdoor is a significant capability. It provides deep, stealthy control over compromised systems, making it virtually invisible to most common detection methods.
That sounds incredibly powerful and hard to find. And how robust was the security for this kernel backdoor itself? Did they practice better OPSEC with this one?
Well, it was mixed. It employed a dual password system. There was a master password, Mewtwo-JDG-XD-XDay, and also a client authentication string at NF4 at hashtag #EvansCGem Gansoon Guld Hivikilla. What's interesting, and shows that mix of good and poor OPSEC again, is that while the configuration script dynamically generated new secret identifiers for each installation, meaning each deployment had unique settings, which is good.
Yeah.
The master password itself remained static across all deployments. It was the same everywhere.
So like a skeleton key for all their kernel backdoors.
Precisely. Think of it like that hotel chain analogy again. Each room deployment has a unique key card, secret identifiers, which is good security. But if the master key, the master password for all rooms is the same and gets stolen or discovered, then every single room is vulnerable. This highlights a critical lapse in their overall operational security for even their most advanced tools, leaving a single obvious point of weakness that was ultimately exploited in this leak.
Okay, moving on. Cobalt Strike is a notorious name, a popular tool for many threat actors, both criminals and states. Did Kimsuky use that in their operations too?
Yes. The intelligence revealed Kimsuky's extensive use of customized Cobalt Strike C2 beacons. Cobalt Strike started as a legitimate penetration testing tool, but it's heavily abused by adversaries worldwide to establish command and control over compromised machines. What's particularly telling here isn't just that they used it, but the evidence of active development and customization of their Cobalt Strike payloads. The dump showed their use of the IntelliJ IDEA Integrated Development Environment, or IDE, that's a software development tool. And the workspace.xml file within their projects contained development artifacts like open file pointers, cursor positions within the code, and recent project search history.
So they weren't just downloading it, they were actively coding and modifying it.
Exactly. This indicates ongoing customization and enhancement of their beacon capabilities, with the timestamps showing the last updates were made as recently as June 2024. The config.cpp file, for example, contained binary blobs that researchers could parse to reveal specific C2 settings, communication protocols, and operational parameters for their custom beacons. This points to sophisticated software development practices within the group. It suggests that Kimsuky likely maintains dedicated in-house development teams specifically for enhancing their malware, rather than just using off-the-shelf tools they find or buy. This implies significant resource allocation from the North Korean state and a long-term strategy for continuously improving their offensive capabilities and adapting to defensive measures.
That's a key insight, dedicated development teams. And what about more powerful exploits for initial access, beyond just social engineering or maybe known vulnerabilities? Did they have anything like 0 days or potent exploits in their arsenal?
Well, their arsenal also included a potent tool known as Bushfire. This was identified as an exploit specifically targeting Avanti systems. It likely exploited vulnerabilities like CVE 2025-0282, CVE 2025-0283, or maybe CVE 2025-22457. These are critical flaws found in Avanti products. This exploit installs a backdoor payload and represents a significant capability for gaining initial access against enterprise networks, especially given how widespread Avanti's use is in corporate and government environments for things like VPN and secure access.
Okay, so a powerful exploit. What's the catch?
What's particularly fascinating and creates a real attribution dilemma here is that Mandiant, a leading threat intelligence firm, recently identified this exact Bushfire payload being used in active campaigns out in the wild. And Mandiant initially attributed that activity to a group they track as UNC522E1, which they suspected was a China Nexus espionage actor.
Wait, so Mandiant thought this tool was Chinese, but it was found in Kimsuky's toolkit.
Precisely. The clear presence of this exact exploit in Kimsuky's arsenal, revealed by this leak, suggests a few possibilities, and they're all intriguing. Either there's significant tool sharing happening between different threat groups, maybe even cross-nation state collaboration we weren't fully aware of, or there's been potential misattribution happening in the threat intelligence community that now needs reevaluation based on this new evidence. It raises a really important question. Who truly developed Bushfire? Are these groups, Kimsuky and UNC5221, actually working together somehow? Or is one simply borrowing or stealing the best tools from another? The lines are definitely getting blurrier.
Okay, now for the part that truly throws a massive curveball into traditional attribution models. This challenges everything we thought we knew about this notoriously North Korean group. The evidence suggests a potential and frankly pretty shocking Chinese connection for our operator Kim. So the biggest head-scratcher of all, the question everyone's asking after this leak, is Kim actually Chinese?
This is where it gets really interesting and, quite frankly, very complex. Analysis of the leaked intelligence raises some truly compelling questions that completely upend our standard assumptions about Kimsuky. Initially, yeah, some data points seem to support the traditional North Korean attribution. For instance, the operator maintained Korean Standard Time as their local system time, and generally seemed to follow a regular 9:00 a.m. to 5:00 p.m. Korean time work schedule.
Okay, that sounds North Korean.
Right, on the surface. But as researchers dug deeper, significant discrepancies emerged that challenged this assumption in a major way.
So what's that discrepancy? What's the biggest red flag that makes us seriously question the purely North Korean connection for this operator?
The most significant cultural and operational indicator, I think, is that the operator consistently observes holidays according to the Chinese calendar, not North or South Korean holidays. That's a fundamental cultural marker, It dictates when you don't work. Furthermore, analysis of attack activity, particularly during a 2019 campaign that targeted South Korean diplomats, showed it primarily originated from a time zone consistent with China, UTC+8. But the most telling detail, the real memorable aha moment from the analysis, was what researchers called a perfect 3-day pause in operations. This pause coincided precisely with Chinese national holidays in early April 2025.
A perfect 3-day pause matching Chinese holidays.
Exactly. And during this same period, operations apparently continued right through North and South Korean holidays without any interruption at all. This perfect 3-day pause is such a clear, definitive detail. It strongly suggests the operator's allegiance, or at least their working schedule, is tied to Chinese cultural and national observances, much more so than North Korean ones. It's incredibly hard to explain that pattern away if the operator were purely North Korean operating on a North Korean schedule.
That's incredibly strong circumstantial evidence, a definitive operational pattern tied directly to Chinese cultural norms. Are there any language or other cultural indicators that further support this idea?
Absolutely. The data dump reveals a fascinating linguistic pattern. The operator frequently uses online translation tools to translate Korean and other languages into Chinese in order to understand content they encounter. This strongly suggests that Chinese is their primary or native language, rather than Korean. If they were fluent in Korean, why translate to Chinese constantly? Exactly. This pattern of consistent translation to Chinese is a powerful indicator of their likely native tongue. Furthermore, one specific exploit found in the dumps contains explicit Chinese language instructions embedded within it. It basically says, "Contact us if exploit failed," but written in Chinese characters. This points to either Chinese development of the tool itself, or at the very least requires Chinese-speaking operational support for using that tool. It adds another layer to this already complex puzzle. It's not just a casual note, it's an embedded instruction within their own tools.
And what about their choice of technical environment, the software they used? Does that align with a potential Chinese connection too?
It definitely does. As we mentioned, the operator uses Deepin Linux. Now, Deepin is a Linux distribution that is particularly popular among Chinese users. It actually ranks #1 on DistroWatch, a site that tracks Linux distributions among Chinese users. Deepin Linux comes pre-installed with Chinese input methods and applications like WeChat and QQ readily available via Deepin Wine, which are staples in Chinese software ecosystems. The consistent choice of this specific development environment and these particular tools aligns perfectly with preferences common in Chinese technical communities, rather than typical North Korean or broader international alternatives. When you put it all together, the holiday observance, the language patterns, the software choices, these multiple converging data points make the Chinese connection argument incredibly compelling and increasingly difficult to ignore. It forces us to rethink our initial simple assumptions.
So given all this perplexing evidence, what does this all mean for us? What are the main theories or scenarios to explain this complex attribution puzzle? Who is Kim, really?
Yeah, this raises a truly important question about the true identity of the operator, and maybe even the very nature of modern nation-state cyber operations. It gets complicated fast. We have, I think, 3 primary scenarios to consider, and each one has significant implications. First, maybe the most straightforward explanation. North Korean operatives in Chinese territory. It's entirely plausible that North Korean intelligence operatives are physically based and operating from within Chinese territory. This would neatly explain the Chinese time zone activity, their adherence to Chinese holiday schedules, and maybe even their preference for Chinese technical environments, all while still maintaining North Korean strategic objectives. It could be a practical solution for a state actor looking for a safer, more robust operating base outside their own borders.
Okay, North Koreans working from China. What's the second possibility?
Second, we could be looking at a Chinese APT mimicking Kimsuky. It's possible a Chinese Advanced Persistent Threat Group is deliberately conducting operations using Kimsuky's known techniques, tools, and infrastructure. The goal here would be to create attribution and confusion, a false flag operation. They might even target Kimsuky's traditional targets as a form of misdirection, drawing the blame away from themselves and pointing the finger squarely at North Korea.
Deception. And the third scenario?
And third, maybe a more complex scenario, a collaborative intelligence effort. The activity we're seeing might represent a collaborative effort where North Korean intelligence requirements are actually being fulfilled, at least partially, through Chinese resources, Chinese operators, or Chinese infrastructure. This creates a kind of hybrid operational model. This scenario is particularly interesting because it fundamentally blurs traditional nation-state boundaries. You'd have resource sharing, deliberate attribution, obfuscation, and maybe a drive for operational efficiency leading to this collaboration. It makes it incredibly difficult for outsiders to draw a clear line between the two nations' cyber activities if they're working together, even loosely.
These scenarios really highlight the complexity we're dealing with now. What are the practical implications for defenders like yourself and for organizations out there when the adversary's identity becomes this complex and ambiguous? What do we do?
Yeah, this attribution complexity profoundly challenges traditional defense strategies. It really does. When an actor's identity and motivation become unclear, traditional attribution-based defenses like simply blocking IPs from a specific country, say North Korea, become far less effective. You can't just block traffic from North Korea if the operator is actually sitting in China, right? The focus, therefore, must shift dramatically for defenders. We need to prioritize understanding behavioral patterns and tactical techniques, TTPs, rather than relying solely on assumed geographic or political affiliations. This means looking closely at how they attack, what tools they use, what infrastructure patterns emerge, and what their likely objectives are, regardless of where they appear to be physically located. Defenders absolutely must consider scenarios where multiple nation-state actors might collaborate or share resources, requiring much more sophisticated threat modeling approaches. The whole Kim-China connection is a stark reminder, I think, of how traditional assumptions about threat actor geography and organizational structure may no longer accurately reflect the operational realities of today's cyber warfare. It forces us all to think beyond simple country of origin labels and focus intensely on the actions themselves. #outro.
What a deep dive this has been. Really fascinating stuff. The irony here is just unmistakable, isn't it? A group like Kimsuky, which has spent over a decade infiltrating networks and compromising others, found themselves completely compromised by hackers who then publicly questioned their very ethical foundations. It's a stark and powerful reminder that even the most sophisticated threat actors, the ones we think are untouchable, are not immune to security failures, no matter how clever their own OPSEC is supposed to be. And for you, our listener, this intelligence windfall, this leak, is like getting a rare gift. It's a chance to understand the operational reality of nation-state threat actors, stripping away some of the mystery and revealing their human vulnerabilities and mistakes.
Indeed. It's a fascinating case study. The leaked materials reveal a group combining truly sophisticated technical capabilities, like that kernel backdoor, with some very notable, almost basic operational security gaps. From hard-coded passwords and PHP scripts to static master keys for advanced backdoors and easily exploitable administrative interfaces, there were critical weaknesses exposed. Weaknesses that are frankly surprising for such an advanced group. And the evidence suggesting Chinese connections to traditionally North Korean operations reflects these broader emerging trends we're seeing towards collaboration, resource sharing, and deliberate attribution obfuscation in the whole APT landscape. These insights provide defenders with invaluable detection opportunities against groups that, as we've seen here, often rely on meticulous social engineering and clever abuse of legitimate tools rather than always needing brand new, expensive zero-day exploits. It really shows us that adapting to a constantly evolving threat landscape, focusing on the how they operate rather than just the who we think they are, is absolutely paramount for defense.
So what does this all mean for you moving forward? As Kimsuky undoubtedly rebuilds, retools, and adapts their operations after this exposure, defenders must leverage these insights, these revealed weaknesses and TTPs to try and stay ahead of their evolution. But the bigger, more provocative thought to maybe mull over is this. In an era where nation-states' cyber boundaries are becoming increasingly blurred, where operatives may be working from allied territories, or even actively using false flags to confuse attribution, how do you truly identify and defend against an adversary whose identity is potentially a moving target, or maybe even a collaborative effort? The next major APT intelligence windfall, the next big leak, may be just one successful breach away. And it might just reveal yet another layer of complexity that challenges everything we thought we knew about cyber warfare and who's really behind the keyboard.
Thank you for tuning into the Malfunction Radio powered by God Access. That was a great breakdown from Adam and Eve. It's been a pleasure guiding you through today's deep dive into the world of cybersecurity and red teaming. Remember, if it's not malfunctioning, we're not doing it right. Stay curious, stay secure, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Bye!